It was only 2 months ago that we made the first best in slot video for Darktide that let us get some pretty decent weapons under the old system. And you all shared some insane items with me on Discord, and I managed to pick up some top tier loot myself. But now crafting has hit its final form, and it only took about as long as an average Dragon Ball Z fight. So I finally get to do the Godroll update. So lighting this off, I'm going to show you how to consistently craft god-tiered items so you can blaze through the game like this. And the biggest positive about this update was that we get more resources for actually playing higher tiers, but that doesn't mean we want to waste them. So we have to roll our items in certain ways to make sure we waste nothing and take everything we can get for Hadron making us reroll perks a million times. And the first step you want to take is to look for weapon breakpoints. I have most of the base values in this spreadsheet that's linked in the description for ranged weapons, and the melee version will hopefully be up by the end of the week. It's actually a pretty hard one to make, but to get there, you need to focus on getting items with good modifiers. So anything with 70 to 80% in its damage categories is going to be good enough to hit most of the breakpoints in the game. And obviously, if you get 80%, that's the best case scenario. Then you want to go for 60 to 70% on the quality of life modifiers. And this is a great example of a bricked 379 heavy stubber. It's almost perfect, and then the perks just went in the dumpster. So that's the kind of item that you want to try tapping up from Gray. And I always get questions about modifiers, so these are all the ones for melee and how they affect scaling, and then these are all the ones for ranged, so that way there's no confusion about what you're actually looking at. So now I'll show you the process on how to actually get a god rolled item. First, we buy the Gray items from the shop until we get a decent roll, and we got pretty lucky and got almost a perfect Thunderhammer right away. Now this is where we find out if our weapon is BIS or if it's PISS by doing our first perk check. And as long as the first perk rolls good, we keep going. And we got unyielding damage, which is a really solid pickup. It lets you do bonus damage from monstrosities, so it's exactly what we needed. And so that means we're going to continue tapping, but if we would have gotten something like crit damage, for instance, I probably would have stopped and went and got more Thunderhammers. Now we're going to tap again, and this blessing is pretty mediocre, but it is what it is because the perk is so good. And considering the modifiers are so high, I'm just going to go for a BIS Thunderhammer here, and I'll talk more about why doing this is important if you don't have something better later on. So we tap again and get crit chance. Realistically, crit is solid, but I'll end up rolling it to carapace later. And finally, we just tap to Lego just to get garbage, but that's okay. All we need to do is rip something off another Thunderhammer, and this thing will get about 50% stronger. Realistically, we do want Thrust as the absolute best one, but Slaughterer and Headtaker are really good too. And if we would have got a combination of Thrust, Slaughterer, or Headtaker, the weapon would have been 100% stronger instead of just 50. So what I'll be doing now is just camping Officer Milkers for one of those 3 blessings at level 4, picking it up, and then just ripping it onto the weapon. And I went over it yesterday, but I'll replay the clip to explain how the blessings and the families actually work now. Basically, you walk up and hit the earn blessing button, and it'll eat whatever weapon you have selected. So make sure you don't have the thing you want to use selected when you do this. And it just puts that blessing in your library permanently by consuming the weapon. And one of the nice things about it is that your blessing library is actually account wide. Now we just need all the resources to be, but it is locked to that specific type of weapon. So for an example, if you have a Surge Staff, you can only get blessings from other Surge Staffs, not a Void Strike Staff or a Purgatos, even though they have the same type of blessings, which I do hope they end up changing in the future. But another example, just in case that wasn't enough, is an MG4 Lasgun shares a blessing pool with the MG12 Lasgun. So as long as it's in the same family of weapons, it can acquire the blessings you rip out. And unfortunately, it does lock the other blessing that you don't reroll, just like the perks. So now to show you the actual god roll, I picked up this MGLA from Milkers, and I'm just going to destroy it by ripping the T4 Deadly Accurate off of it. Then I'm going to look over at the stacked MG12 that we rolled up, and we're going to go for the absolute god roll here. The Deadly Accurate and the Headhunter combo gives you insane damage output, so even though Infernus is good, this combo is going to be a lot better in the long run. And then we just need to roll that perk to 5% crit chance. 5% crit chance? Oh no. Not like this.
2 hours later.
And it looks like I'm settling for 4%.
So the Thunderhammer was an example of your first stage item, what you should go for initially. And then the last gun was an example of an end game god roll that you'll be going for after you have your first set of gear completed. But the best way to get level 3 and 4 blessings is actually to turn Mr. Milker's finest equipment into Blessing Dusted Hadron. And since weekly missions are so easy to complete now, it basically just lets you buy whatever you need whenever it actually ends up popping up. And that basically just puts me in the waiting room to get some perfect items. But if you are down horrendous for something like I was on my Thunderhammer, you could just spam upgrade to blue and pray that the Emperor gives you that blessing, or you can shop camp. I'm never shop camping again. I just can't be bothered. But I also made a few text guides with the best perks and blessings for you so that I didn't have to talk about each weapon individually again. But if you do want to hear me talk about it, I do summarize them all in this video right here. It is a little out of date, but the only things that have really changed are the Blaze Away blessings. Then I did the same thing for the ranged weapons, and I will say for the most part that these are pretty accurate, but there are multiple best combos of perks and blessings for each weapon depending on your build. And I do cover those in my class guides. This is just more of a general works for everything type setup for every weapon for the people that really need that reference point. So I just want to clear this up now as to why I always get this question. The reason I have crit chance on so many items is that crit chance is multiplicative with every damage modifier on Darktide, and you don't actually have to crit for them to be affected by its base value. And every single class has a 5% base crit chance, and Veteran has a 10% for some reason, but every single weapon also has a base crit chance. So when you add that 4 to 5%, it just lets you put out 25% more damage about 10% of the time, but it quickly adds up with some weapons getting into that 25 to 40% base, and that's when the damage output starts getting out of control. So general rules for melee weapons are crit chance, carapace, bonus stamina, and unyielding damage are usually top tier, with unarmored damage only being good if you need a breakpoint to one-shot zombies, but that's usually not needed because they're just chaff anyways. And after that, when we look at blessings, most of the time you just want scaling percent damages stacked on top of each other. And then it's also worth looking at some of the weapon specials like Haymaker or something that lets you one-shot humanoid targets. And that takes us into ranged weapons, and it gets a little more complicated here, but crit chance is usually followed with crit damage, reload speed, or a percent damage to unyielding or carapace, and blessings are pretty standard for most weapons, but some really stand out. Like the new Blaze Away blessing is absolutely ridiculous on the Flamer and the Ogren weapons. It basically put all the weapons with Blaze Away into the solo carry potential category. So just try to keep those things in mind when you are rolling for items, and if you do want a deeper explanation of everything, the reasoning behind all that stuff is in the specific class guide videos, and I will be updating all of them over the course of the next week, but I still think they stand up as future-proof for everything except Blaze Away, obviously, because it's just so good now. You would just want Blaze Away plus something on basically every weapon that you could get it on. But not everybody's going to be able to god roll. Not everybody's going to want to god roll, and I don't think you should god roll for your first set of gear. I know a lot of people don't have the time to spam missions or can't even do damnation to generate a ton of materials, and that's why I wanted to show you the most efficient way to save bats and get the best stuff. And I've shown on the alt channel a few times that as long as you have good game sense and a min-max feat build, a weapon with good base modifiers is all you need to carry a lobby. And when you add even one good perk and blessing into the mix, it starts scaling your damage through the roof, letting you dump on all the waifu zombies. And trust me, with this update, you're going to have to carry harder than ever because all the T3 and 4 gods are moving up, and it's honestly something out of a nightmare. So even if you don't have the materials right now, I am still going to recommend you soft roll because it does save you the most materials. But for your first best in slot legendary, you should aim for one good perk and one good blessing, and that's it. So overall, I really don't want you to fall into the trap of needing a god roll as your first item. It's not realistic. That's like the late game. That's the RNG curve. That should be like your end game goal and the reason you keep playing. For now, the people that are just starting to push into T5, you need to understand that a good base item is all you need. And then after you have a set of your favorite weapons in a good state, then you start going for those huge end game rolls because it costs an exponential amount of materials that you probably don't have right now. I'll personally be grinding a ton of mats out and doing a massive enhancing stream on Twitch to get god tier items for every single class. And this is basically the same approach I've been taking to weapons for about 2 months, and now I'm really enjoying the finished version of the game because it actually feels more rewarding to play. So if you do have any more questions, I should be streaming when this video goes live, but if you don't catch that, I do hope you enjoyed the video and that you have a great night.